check.
All right. Normally I would come out on stage and we'd start into our first march and we'd rip into our concert and then I'd explain what we just played. However, tonight we're opening with a fairly programmatic piece that depicts a story, and so I'm going to take a few minutes before we perform this and kind of tell you the story and exactly what the program notes are, so that hopefully it'll make some sense once we start playing. This first piece we're going to play is a piece called Ghost Dances, and it was inspired by the tragic story of the massacre of some 300 members of the Lakota Sioux tribe at Wounded Knee, South Dakota in 1890. On the morning of December 29th, a group of about 350 Lakota Sioux were camped on the banks of the Wounded Knee Creek in southwestern South Dakota. Surrounding the camp was a large contingent of U.S. soldiers charged with the responsibility of arresting the chief and disarming his warriors. Emotions were raw, all present were on edge, and the atmosphere was brittle with tension. The preceding months had been devastating for the proud members of the Lakota Sioux tribe. With their buffalo herds rapidly disappearing and with encroachment on all sides by settlers and government forces, the people knew that the way of life they had known forever was rapidly nearing its end. In a desperate attempt to return to the days of their glory, many Native Americans sought salvation in a new mysticism preached by a shaman in Nevada. Several Lakota Sioux emissaries had traveled from South Dakota to hear his message. Wovoka prophesied that the dead would soon rejoin the living in a new world in which all would live without fear. To hasten the event, he encouraged all who would listen to perform the ghost dance. Many dancers wore white or brightly colored shirts emblazoned with images of eagles and buffaloes. As they danced wildly, they believed that these ghost shirts would protect them from the soldiers' bullets. During the fall of 1890, the ghost dance phenomenon spread quickly through the Sioux villages of the Dakota reservations, revitalizing the citizenry and bringing an increased level of fear to the area settlers and to the U.S. Army. In December of 1890, the orders were issued to begin rounding up the area's tribal leaders. One such communication read, quote, "The Sioux are dancing in the snow and are wild. We need protection and we need it now. The leaders should be arrested and confined at some military post until the matter is quieted, and this should be done now." Unquote. After the death of Chief Sitting Bull on December 15th, a group of about 350 Lakotas fled south, seeking protection on the Pine Ridge Reservation. The Army intercepted the group on December 28th and brought them to the edge of the Wounded Knee Creek to camp. In the early morning hours of December 29th, all the Lakota men were summoned to the center of the camp. The soldiers ordered the men to surrender their weapons, agitating an already tense and serious situation. The Lakotas began to stack their guns, but the soldiers were still not satisfied. The troops began ransacking the camp's tents, bringing out bundles, tearing them open, tossing small knives, axes, and tent stakes into a pile. The soldiers then ordered the individual searches of the warriors. Although the exact details of the next few moments are sketchy, most accounts say that one of the Sioux, possibly a medicine man named Yellowbird, spoke out in defiance of the soldiers. Throwing dirt in the air, he danced a few steps of the ghost dance and urged his friends not to worry, that the soldiers' bullets could not harm them. As the tension built to an unbearable level, the unthinkable happened. In the noise and confusion, a Lakota gun accidentally discharged. Within seconds, the troops fired volley after volley into the now unarmed camp. Clouds of smoke and dust filled the air as men, women, and children scrambled for their lives. Many ran for a ravine next to the camp, only to be cut down in a withering crossfire. When the smoke cleared and the terrible chaos drew to a close, nearly 300 Lakota Sioux lay dead. Perhaps no summation of the catastrophic event is more profound or eloquent than the following words offered by the famous Lakota medicine man Black Elk, who survived the massacre. Quote, "I did not know then how much was ended. A people's dream died there. It was a beautiful dream. The nation's hoop was broken and scattered. There is no center any longer, and the sacred tree is dead." Unquote. So we're going to do our best with Roland Barrett's description of those events that day. This features a number of interesting percussion things. We've done some interesting things with the band this year, and included in this, you get wooden wind chimes to kind of set the mood and multiple rain sticks. But one other interesting thing, because some of you may wonder what's going on, Hal Russa, who's joined us, is from the orchestra, is going to help us with some percussion. But one of the techniques in this is really cool, is he's going to take a gong, he's going to hit it, and he's going to drop it in a bucket of water. It's called a water gong. So if you wonder what he's doing, that's what he's doing. And it's kind of you hear an eerie, like, descending of the pitch. It's kind of a neat effect. So to try to musically portray the events that I just described, we'll go ahead and play Ghost Dances. A completely change of pace. The first piece, you know, high energy, very, very exciting. Fast, lots of percussion. This piece has a completely different feel, but it still has an intensity, which is really a nice contrast. This next piece is called Dusk, and the composer writes about how as the sun is setting, and I think most of us have experienced this, is that even though things seem very still and time seems to be kind of suspended, there's kind of a growing intensity, especially with the colors and the incredibly bright orange and red and yellow and white. I mean, those colors can be very, very powerful, but yet everything seems so very still. And as the sun sets, it's such a slow thing, but at the same time, as the sun actually disappears over the horizon, there's that moment where the sky is still bright with light, but we lose the visual connection to the sun. And he's kind of tried to describe that visually, or musically. So this one, although it's a completely different style, still has its own level of intensity, and it's a very slow piece. And the challenges of this piece are incredible because of the endurance that we need as musicians, but also to kind of not have all that percussion bang and to create the energy. We have to create it with color of our instruments and the intensity of the chord progression and the building and the volume. So hope you enjoy this one, Dusk. gives me chills. I hope you like that one. For our last piece, we're going to kind of get rid of all this serious, heavy stuff and try to lighten it up a little bit. This is selections from the musical Hamilton, which I believe is coming to Cleveland this summer. And many of you, I'm sure, have heard it, and many of the students have been listening to the soundtrack. So this is going to feature a bunch of the songs from the show. Helping us out on drum set, you're going to hear him playing marimba a little bit later is Andy Bell. This one is kind of a hit. Hope that the kids really enjoy playing this one. Hope you like it. Hamilton. Before we let these guys leave the stage, we have a many number of seniors on stage performing tonight. So we want to give them a few seconds of recognition here. If you're a senior, come on down front. Come on down. And that's the next contestants. Missing Jeremy Coffin today. Okay, so once again, thank you to all the seniors. Just a brief switch over here. There we go. Just a brief switch over here while we reset the stage for the symphony. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Heights High Symphony portion of the program. We will actually be undertaking right now a rather large stage change. In fact, we're going to be doing that right now and also after this piece. So we hope you get used to our construction. Please pardon our dust, all that sort of stuff. So we are going to start moving. Hint, hint. Tonight, we don't need to pull up the lights, though. We don't need to pull up the house lights. Like I said, we don't need to pull up the house lights. We don't need to make them feel like it's over yet. Tonight, first of all, we started off with music from that great American patriot, Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. I've heard that line used many times just because one of our favorite pieces to listen to on July 4 is the 1812 Overture. And that is certainly one of the most famous things that he wrote. However, it's one of his least favorite things that he wrote as well. Tchaikovsky was known for saying, I really don't like all that bombast, all that craziness, and the just noisy piece of music. And if you know a lot of Tchaikovsky, you know what incredibly intimate music he also wrote. He also wrote a lot of vocal music. He wrote a ton of ballet, as we all know, from our Christmas traditions. This piece, the Serenade for Strings, was actually much nearer and dearer to him in terms of the style that he really admired. His favorite composer was Mozart. And if you listen to the whole serenade, you hear lots of that admiration come through in the writing. So anyway, I'm reminded of a lot of things tonight from my first year here. That piece was on the first program that I conducted at Heights in 2009, in November. So now we turn to our, before we turn to our senior soloist, I also have to give a huge, can't be too overspoken how enormous this thank you has to go out to Stu Ferris. Yes, please give it up for Stu. He has helped us out in so many ways and really helped us to get this performance of the Tchaikovsky in particular up and running, has come in and coached tirelessly, and is always so glad to do it and says, it's really a pleasure for me to do it, and I sincerely hope it continues to be. Stu, thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, our first senior soloist tonight, I remember him from my first year, again, as a fifth grader. Back then, the February concert was something that we did in conjunction. We did a piece in conjunction with the middle schools, and he came and played snare drum, and he was about yay high. And I remember him standing up there and playing snare drum dutifully. It was great. And then I also saw him subsequent years at camp, and also at Mishboff, and it was just really a pleasure to see him grow up. And I remember being particularly excited when I knew that he was going from the 8th grade to the 9th grade and coming up to the high school. He's been a very influential leader among his peers, and also a great role model to our younger students, particularly in his work at the Heights Summer Music Camp. And we've really appreciated the leadership that he's brought to all the upper level ensembles, to the marching band, to just about everything he's touched. And I'm particularly grateful that when he met my son not too long ago, he told him that he should really appreciate what a cool dad he has. Thank you, Andy. 5 now and 20 in 10 years when he's 16. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to bring to the stage now Mr. Andy Ball. So we have another stage change. So now we need to bring out an even bigger percussion instrument. A lot of people aren't maybe aware that the piano is a percussion instrument, but it's because the fact that the strings are hammered that it is a percussion instrument. Yeah, like I was saying. This next senior soloist also reminds me of much earlier years here, even though I haven't had that many yet. Still, I remember him coming to camp as a 5th grader, and a 6th grader, and a 7th grader, and an 8th grader. And he was, I remember early on, in this category of student who was always in the most advanced theory group and always up for a music theory award. And I remember at least, 1 or 2 times coming to the end of our camp week, and where we're supposed to deliberate on awards, and someone said, "Oh yeah, it's got to be the Vandenbogerts," and I was like, "Well, they got it last year." So music theory was something that was always a gift of William's. And that is embodied tonight in the fact that we are not only featuring him as a soloist, but also as an arranger and composer. So if you were there earlier for the chamber ensembles, you heard an arrangement of his of the music of Star Wars for brass quintet. Now you get to hear an arrangement of his for full orchestra and piano, of course. So this is very exciting. We have a world premiere, so to speak, tonight, right here in Cleveland Heights. So it looks like we're getting the stage pretty well set here. I have to say, William has done a tremendous job leading in so many ways this year. He's been somebody who gladly took the position of serving as our lead trumpet player in the musical for all 4 nights. Generally speaking, I try and split up those duties so that the students, it gets spread around a little bit, and not everybody has to bear so much weight. But in this case, William was clearly somebody who could fill that lead trumpet role very well in this musical book that we had for Anything Goes, and he did a brilliant job doing it. And that's just, kind of the tip of the iceberg when you look at everything that's still coming tonight. He's also an incredibly intelligent individual, as you all know. And one of those marks of intelligence is that he's not going into music. Man, I wish someone had told me. So, anyway, it is really a true pleasure for me to bring to the stage now for you Mr. William Vandenbogert. William is such a team player that he's going to help us tune. He's going to give us a couple A's. We're going to take just a short break here for a moment to get some sheet music. like to call up to the front all of our seniors who are going to be graduating. So please, and all of our seniors. Seniors, we wish you all well. We hope everything continues brilliantly for all of you. And we do hope that you come back and visit us often. Tell us all the great things that are going on in your lives. I'd also, just as a PS to this final performance, I'd also like to give great thanks to Mr. Ben Hammond, who jumped in on tuba at the last second. As he is, he already made his way off, but we are grateful for his presence when our other tuba players had an accident with a brick wall. So, at this point, we're going to invite you all over to join us for refreshments and let's party a little bit.